Welcome. Toledo Public Schools Family and School Collaborative presents From Garden to Table. From Garden to Table is back. We're very excited today. Today is January 7th, 2021. And there's just a few things that we want to go over before we get started. The functions of Google Meets, if you could, and if you haven't already, please put yourself on mute. And we just want to remind everybody that this session is being recorded. I just want to introduce myself. My name is Alina Rodriguez. I'm the Family Engagement and Community Outreach Coordinator for Toledo Public Schools.
And I'm Nicole Shetterly, the Family Engagement Coordinator for our Early Childhood Preschool program. And if you can, just introduce yourself in the chat and where your child attends school or the site that you work at.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started then. We have a very special guest here today with us. We have Mr. Malcolm Cunningham. He's the manager at the Ebeid Center, the Ebeid Neighborhood Promise Social Determinants of Health Department. And he has a very special series that he's, cooking series that he's brought to Toledo Public Schools. So Malcolm, we're very happy to have you today, and I'm gonna let you take it away.
Okay, hey everyone, how's it going? Yeah, I'm really excited to be able to kind of come back around and do a little bit more with everyone. I have a screen that I am going to present. There we go. All right. And if you all can't see it, let me know. But yeah, here we are. So yep. Garden the Plate, the second series. So yeah, my name is Malcolm Cunningham. I am an avid grower. I'm a master urban farmer. I think for the past 3 or 4 years, I've been a master urban farmer. I used to have 1/3 of an acre that I worked on alongside youth at the Zeph Center. So taught them how to grow food, how to prepare food, how to store it, and had family dinners with chefs, with family members, with the youth themselves, and the youth bought shares by participating in the program. So it was a really great program. I ended up working. I left that program in order to go back and get a little bit more education when it came to population health and public health. So I worked up in Michigan for a while at the University of Michigan. Now I'm back and I'm working back in my hometown for the Ebeid Center for Promedica, leading the Ebeid Center. And the Ebeid Center is basically kind of a hub for social determinants of health, which is basically what are those upstream things like finances, like health, like education, like housing, that really lead to long-term well-being and to positive health outcomes that eventually actually reduce costs within the healthcare space. So it's really attempting to create a model for neighborhood development and investment that improves those social determinants in order to improve those downstream kind of health costs that we talk about. So that's pretty much what the Ebeid Center is and the Ebeid Neighborhood Promise work is. And like I said, I'm really excited to bring this to you all today. I think we got really into some of the meals and the things that I made last session, and I hope at some point we'll actually be able to do this in person, because as you can see, I don't know if you can see actually, we have this beautiful large kitchen that's designed for people to come in and to learn hands-on, to teach others, to engage in all sorts of ways. So I really hope to eventually have you all in person soon at some point, but for the time being, we're gonna make do. So yeah, let's go for it. I guess I don't need to tell you about the Ebeid Neighborhood Promise. I already rambled about it a little bit, so I'll go right past that. So yeah, I think it's pretty interesting that we're starting in January. I think that's by design on my end. I think sometimes we don't think about gardening. We don't think about all of the steps that go into having a really productive, fun year until it gets to around April or May. And then by then, in my opinion, as a planner, I would say it's almost too late, right? So I wanted to spend some time today just talking through some of the winter activities that are fun and also are pretty meaningful for preparing for an upcoming season. And I also just wanted to continue to affirm we can continue to eat seasonally even when nothing is actively growing. We're going to be making a soup today, which is just hearty, delicious. I have a bowl of it sitting right next to me that I am definitely going to be eating at some point during this recording. With sweet potato with kale from my garden. And, if I would have had my ducks in a row, the previous season, I would have had garlic from my garden. I would have had onions from my garden. So we're going to transition, as always, from garden to plate. Then we're going to talk a bit about next session and you know, hopefully what we can do, you know, going into this upcoming year. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Yeah, let's just start. It's winter time, right? Like, why are we talking about gardening right now? What do you think the point is? What's the purpose? And you know, if you want to speak up, if you want to talk in the chat box throughout, just go for it. I typically start my planning for the following season in the winter. You know, I get pretty sad, to be honest with you, around October or so, because the leaves start changing, and I know I'm going to be going into, you know, this extended period of you know, shortened days, and there's not going to be as much green growth going on. But I can look at a seed catalog and I can see all the beautiful green growth that I could ever want, right? So it's a great time of year for me, just emotionally, because it gives me a little pick me up and something to look forward to. But it's also just a great time to really just start thinking through the what's, the why's, the where's, the how's, and not worrying so much about the when. Yeah, so that's really what we're going to be doing in the winter. So the first thing that you really want to do when you start planning in the winter is think about the what. What is it that you want to grow? What variety is it that you want to grow of that item? Why do you want to grow those things? How much do you really want to grow of that item? So we're going to go through kind of all those things. I have a couple of charts for you all that I think will be pretty helpful. The other thing to think about is the where, right? So that typically kind of informs all the other pieces, right? So if you're growing at a community garden and you have a 4x8 bed, that's a little different than growing on a balcony, right? That's a little different than growing in your backyard. So one of the things that you can start thinking about this time of year is, you know, where you hope to actually grow things. And the other thing that's great about that is if you're interested in using an outdoor space, if you're interested in using, you know, a community garden, if you reach out to these community gardens in your communities, or if you're interested in starting one in your neighborhood, this is the best time to start because some people drop off and there is a greater likelihood of there being access to some of these spaces. You know, there's a Glenwood garden that's over there. There's you know, hopefully the Zeph garden at some point becomes you know, back to production. There's community gardens everywhere, and you know, all of them have, I would say, different kind of structures for how you actually get access to the land. But typically what happens is there's a group of people in that neighborhood or in that community, and you basically pay a little bit of money to pay for like water, to pay for collective fees, and you get access to a plot of land. And you know, honestly, sometimes there's a significant waiting list to get into that plot of land. So if you reach out during the winter, it's a great opportunity to actually, you know, get access to it. So that's just something to think about. I'm curious about, you know, some of these questions. I'd love to hear a little bit from the folks that are on the call. Well, I guess in this meeting today. What are you hoping to grow this year? And kind of just working through that entire thing. What are you going to grow? Why do you want to grow it? Where are you going to do it? Maybe we can just start there. I'd love to hear a little bit from folks that are in the room.
I always grow lots and lots of tomatoes and hot peppers to make salsa.
Yeah.
And can it up. And I think I canned up probably 4 or 5 dozen small jars of salsa, including black bean and corn salsa and peach
nice.
salsa. I have a peach tree in my garden too. So
wow.
It doesn't produce a whole lot, but sometimes we get enough just to make a little bit of peach salsa.
Great. That's amazing. How many years have you had the peach tree? Or how old is your peach tree, I guess?
We've lived in this house, let's see, for 12 years. And I think we bought it the first year, and it probably took 2 or 3 years before it was producing. We bought it as a small tree, so.
Gotcha.
But we also have a lot of squirrels in our yard that like peaches.
Yeah. They
We don't
take care of some of the cleanup for you, right?
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Any other people want to share or talk through a few things that they're growing or that they want to grow?
So this is Jacqueline, and I would like to grow peppers and cucumbers, carrots, celery, radishes, lettuce, tomatoes. So I'm definitely in the
everything.
learning process. Yes.
Okay. Have you grown anything before? Have you had a garden before?
Primarily plants and really just one try at tomatoes. So
Okay.
I'm green.
Yeah. No problem. That's the best time to start, right?
Yeah.
The best time well, I guess the next best time is today. Is that what the phrase is, or is that what the quote is? Yeah.
I'm with you, Malcolm.
There we go. Yeah. I think the best time to start a garden was yesterday, but the second best time is today. There we go. Something along those lines. That's great. Do you have a space in mind right now for where you're going to be growing things?
So we do have a yard, and I have to still figure out which side of the house might make more sense with sunlight. And I've seen success when people have done beds. So I'm considering doing that as well.
Okay, great. And do you have an amount that you have in mind when you're talking about the cucumbers and tomatoes and things of that nature? Do you want to provide for the season? Do you want to provide for the entire year? What about those pieces?
So I think that'll be determined by the amount of space that I would actually use, and just kind of giving each of it a try. Ideally, I would just love to not have to buy any of it at a grocery store. And be able to just produce it all on my own. But I think space will be the primary determining factor. And then from there, it'll be what will grow
well in your space.
Right, exactly.
Great. Yeah, those are all meaningful things to consider as you're entering into a new growing season or an initial growing season. That makes perfect sense. And honestly, sometimes the first year when you're attempting to take on something like kind of large scale, it's just experimentation. Like you said, you want to try a bunch of different varieties. You want to see what grows well here, maybe even figure out a rotation for the following year. I would say, just kind of embrace that, and you will learn many, many, many things that very first year. Just thinking about my first year, I tried out. I love square foot gardening, but I tried the original spacing that was in mind, and everything was just completely overgrown. Lost a bunch of tomatoes, had cabbage that was crowding out peppers, everything, because I thought that I could just, it says cabbage. Well, it's this cabbage, so I'm going to go for it. But maybe it's not the right variety. Maybe it's not the right setup. It's just always a learning process.
I think I need a one-on-one tutorial with you, Malcolm.
It's lots of fun. I may be up for that. We'll see as the season, as this pandemic goes, right? I think that's really the key.
Yes, and we can laugh together.
Yeah. Any other folks want to share anything about what they're hoping to grow or hoping to do this year?
So last year we did broccoli and Brussels sprouts, which we don't usually do, but gave it a try. I think the only thing that I found with it is that the Brussels sprouts, we harvested them and it was just one stalk. And then I baked them, with some balsamic vinegar and stuff like that. And then I ate it in 2 days, and I was like, oh, I kind of wanted this to go a little bit longer than 2 days.
Right.
And it was very similar with the broccoli. I ate it just very quickly. So I think it'd be nicer to have some plants that or some harvests that go a little bit longer. Like my daughter only likes tomatoes out of the garden. She doesn't like the store-bought kind. So she hasn't been eating tomatoes all winter.
Yeah.
That's where we are.
Honestly, it's kind of the curse of gardening or growing a really nice tomato. It just makes it really hard to enjoy things out of the store. Honestly, I never really considered celery an herb or anything of that nature until I grew it on my own. And I had the tiniest little stalks of celery, but they were so fragrant, so vibrant that I didn't really need to use that much. It was just a fundamentally different experience. It's always so exciting to, just see the way that getting access to all sorts of different varieties of these same plants really just opens up our mind, opens up the way that we think about food, the way we think about vegetables. I think that's really an exciting thing about gardening as well. Yeah.
That's
And
gonna.
no, I had nothing to say. I was
going to say, I think you mentioned thinking about what varieties and stuff you want. And I have a very big garden, and we plant probably 50 tomato plants a year. We pick about 5 of some of our all-time favorites, and then we'll add some others. And I think the variety thing is a good idea because we've always planted early girls, and they're our favorite, and they produce a lot. This year they were awful, and other ones did well. So it's just really important to have, especially if you're doing not a lot of the same variety, several of different varieties, because one year one variety of something might do great and the others might not. So
yeah, that's a really great point. It's a really great point. You never really know how a particular plant is going to adapt to like your hyper specific climate. Living in a city, we have like a microclimate here because the sun is reflecting off the brick and it warms up the soil a little bit faster, right? Or you have a ton of blacktop around you, so it's a little bit warmer. Or there's not a lot of shade, or there's too much shade, or whatever those things are. It really changes the way that all these different crops are going to perform, even within like one family. So even within a tomato family, like you were saying. And it's also kind of a protection against disease in some ways. If you're following your hygiene routine and doing all those parts, which we'll get into probably in May or June or something like that, then, there's still the possibility of a particular bacteria, wiping out, I don't know, like your black crim tomatoes, but hopefully your other plants will survive. So it's just kind of that idea of, biodiversity is a strength. So yeah, I think that's a really good point. And kind of, continuing on that point, I have a few things up. I'm hoping that Rare Seeds is up right now. I think every single person, oh, well, it looks like it's down right now. But I think at some point in your life as a gardener, you have to order the full seed catalog from Rare Seeds, or it's either called Rare Seeds or it's called Baker's Creek. Okay. I don't have it pulled up because their website is down because too many people are ordering at the same time. But this is another one. Just being able to access a seed catalog and see 20 pages of tomatoes that transition from white all the way to deep dark purple and everywhere in between is just such a fascinating experience. They have just like gorgeous descriptions for, the way that the acidity comes out in this type of tomato, the way that the eggplant from this region reacts to your climate. There's just so many interesting things that are out there when you start to look into some of these large seed catalogs. And again, honestly, it's a thing that gets me through the winter. It really is. So if you ever want to request a catalog, another great place to order from is Johnny's Seeds. You can actually order it and get it for free. And the same is true with Rare Seeds for their free seed one. They have one that's, like I said, the full seed catalog that costs, I think, maybe $15 or so. But, you buy it once and it's almost like a coffee table book almost. It's so special. Well, I'm biased, clearly, right? So that's that. So yeah, definitely take a look at seed catalogs. And the other thing that I haven't mentioned is every year, Toledo Grows and a couple of other vendors put together a seed swap. I'm not sure what's going to happen with that this year. It probably isn't going to happen due to the pandemic, but you can go to that seed swap when it happens and get 5 free packets of seed. And if you have a community garden, that's normally one of the days when you pick up seeds for your community garden. So it's a really cool opportunity to learn a ton about gardening, to learn a ton about what's going on in your community, to get signed up for community gardens. And yeah, it's going to obviously take a different format this year. Maybe it'll be online, but that's another thing to look out for.
Yeah, they
so
said
that,
they're going to do a virtual swap this year.
Oh, great. Yeah, so it's a great time. I love it. It's one of my favorite things of the season, especially, you know, getting through those winter doldrums. I think it's pretty special for that as well. So talked about that. Like I said, save the win for February. Don't worry too much about, you know, your actual phased planting guide. Every single thing that you grow, whether you're starting it indoors or purchasing it, typically has a time to plant it, when you should either put in the seed or put in the plant or transition it to a larger pot or whatever those things are. And learning a lot more about that will really, you know, help to elevate your growing practices. And even, what I think one of the participants mentioned about Brussels sprouts, how do we plan that out both for the amount that we're growing, but also the timing of that growing so that we can have those things ready. I think it's one of the things that helped me become a better project manager, I would say, actually, learning that, I had a CSA and I had a family dinner, and I knew that I wanted to have spinach on this week, and I wanted to have this much spinach for the family dinner, right? So it's just like, from there, you have to work backwards and you have to figure out the appropriate planting time for wave 1, wave 2, wave 3. And it just becomes this kind of rhythm that, it's a lot of fun, and it also provides that access year round. So that's another thing to consider. But like I said, we're not going to go too deep in it right now. We're going to wait until February for that. And the last thing that you can do during the winter, among a million other things, is try growing a plant. I forgot to grab my extra sweet potato. I'm sorry about that, guys. But I normally will grow one of my sweet potatoes indoors over the season, or during the winter, just because I love having vining plants, and I also want to just see, whether or not it'll produce viable slips for the growing season the next year. It's too early, realistically, to start them in order to grow them outside, but it is a nice thing to do, right? So what you do is you take a sweet potato, you hold it so that it's vertical, and you stick either toothpicks or chopsticks or skewers through it, and you put it in a glass of water, and you put it somewhere where it'll get a little bit of sunlight and a little bit of warmth. And within a couple of weeks, you'll start to see those roots that are growing out, and you'll also start to see little eyes, kind of eyes on potatoes that eventually form vines, and then eventually form just a really beautiful, snaking, just beautiful vine. I do it every season, like I said, and it's not so much for growing plants for the new year, but you can grow plants for the new year that way if you want to. It's just another thing I do to try to, still feel like I'm doing some good in the world when it comes to food. So those are the things. The other thing, Toledo Grows is an amazing resource. You can start to figure out the layout for your space. You go outdoors and you measure out your space for whatever it is, and you transfer that onto a sheet of graph paper, and then you start figuring out what kind of space you have in mind and how you're really going to form these up. So I think cutting them out or using sticky notes or using things of that nature is a great way to just kind of manipulate the space before you actually get to the process of building or purchasing or figuring out what your growing space really looks like. So that's another exciting thing that I just described graph paper as exciting. I hope you all are okay with that.
Thumbs up.
Yeah. This is another really important thing that you can do during the winter. And the other thing is, and this is something that I will share as a document if you all are interested in, is you can start to think about how much do you really want to grow in order to provide for yourself for a length of time, right? So these charts that I have listed are the amount of food that you would typically grow if you wanted to provide that much for a person over a season, okay? Snap beans, if you wanted to grow green beans over a season, then you would need 4 to 8 plants that would produce about 3 to 5 pounds every 10-foot row. And this is the spacing requirement for them. These are just some charts that are really helpful to have on hand. You can print them off or you can just save them on your phone. And it's just a great way to think about, what sorts of items, you really want to plant this year and your spacing and that graph that I showed you a little bit earlier. So that's a thing to consider. And, this is a good point to stop. Are there any plants in particular between A and C that aren't listed that you would like to have information on? I know someone mentioned Brussels sprouts. I can get that added to the chart, no problem. But any other plants or things that you have in mind between A and C? It's kind of a pop quiz on how many vegetables you know, right?
So is
Yep.
eggplant on there?
I believe so. Maybe it
Okay.
isn't. I can add eggplant.
And radishes?
I will add radishes.
Thank you.
I think it was just my bias where I just only put things that I really like.
It's a
You
great
can
start.
tell. Yeah, you can tell it's my chart for sure. Yeah, so just going through down the list, collards, corn, cucumber, and this is, kind of the difference with this one for cucumber as an example is we're thinking about pickling as opposed to fresh slicing. So I could even add one for slicing cucumbers if that was the way that you wanted to eat them, as opposed to pickling. I could add that in as well. With garlic, the other thing is these charts will become more complex over time. If you want me to add things like, planting time or harvesting time, we could also, incorporate that sort of thing as well. So just going through the list, and I wanted to point out melon. That's for musk melons that aren't watermelons. So that's like a cantaloupe or a honeydew or things of that nature, as opposed to the watermelon, which I also have listed.
Do you ever talk about, or do you have anywhere pests and treatment of that for particular plants? I had an awful time this year with worms on I had broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, cabbage. They were awful. And it was on my kale too.
Yeah.
So
I think that would be helpful. Yeah, I definitely think we could do that, and I can just continue to build these out. Maybe it becomes a couple of documents that are eventually a packet, of information. And I also know, I don't know if you all are familiar with. I didn't add this as a link. The Urban Agriculture Alliance. They're kind of a policy / educational space when it comes to urban agriculture. So. It's something that was formed because of, this entire situation with a grower that was remediating his soil, remediating the land, and growing his own food, and he ended up getting all sorts of fines for it. So the Urban Agriculture Alliance actually ended up changing some zoning laws to allow for urban agriculture, and they're a great resource at this point. So they actually put together a growing guide, which I can share, and I didn't even think about. In addition to these sorts of things, so that we can just have all the resources. I think that would be pretty great. And I believe that there's also a Facebook group for the Urban Agriculture Alliance, as well as Toledo Community Gardening, I believe. I can get the specific names. I didn't even think about that. But yeah, absolutely. With pests, I'll go down a rabbit hole. So I hear what you're saying, and I will figure out a way to deliver the information back to you. Instead of telling you everything right now, because I know how I get, right? So any other items that you all are interested in seeing on this chart? And you can come back to it at some point once you actually have it in hand. and we can just add to it as needed. Okay, so that'll be something for next session. Okay. All right, so we are going to show a very brief video that is using some of the items from my garden. So it's using the sweet potatoes that I grew this year, which were actually pretty small, and the kale. So I have a variety of kale called lacinato kale. Sometimes it's called dinosaur kale. It just looks like prehistoric in some ways. And the great thing about things in that family, that cole crop family, whether it be, a kale, a cabbage, kale, cabbage, collards, just things that are in that cole crop family, is if you get them to a certain point before the first frost hits, they'll normally survive for a fair amount of the winter. They'll just grow very slowly or just completely pause with their growth. I won't say that they'll overwinter without being protected, but it is a possibility depending on the microclimate that you have, which is, again, another story entirely. But I say all that to say, I knew that I had the sweet potatoes on hand. I hadn't checked out my growing space in a while, so I stopped back there on a snowy day, and I saw that I still had a bunch of kale coming in. So that's where the impetus, or that's where this particular soup comes from. Whenever I want to figure out, how to incorporate a leafy green that's a bit tougher into something, and I'm thinking about the winter, and I'm thinking about, just something that's savory and just has a lot of body to it. Sweet potatoes come to mind, and tossing some sort of leafy green in there comes to mind as well. So that's where this idea came from. It's a really straightforward, simple soup. Doesn't have to have meat added. I guess I could play the video while I'm also talking about this. That's also a possibility. Today, this video will be about sausage, sweet potato, and kale soup. So let's get started. Oh, that is not. There we go. All right. So I know that we've had issues with audio, so you won't be able to hear the sizzle, but you'll still get a chance to see it. So these are all things from my garden. That's the kale that I was talking about. So the very first thing that I did is I just, cooked down 1 pound of sausage. I actually use turkey sausage just because it's a bit leaner. Well, it's much leaner. Then I put in a medium onion that I just diced up, pretty rough chop, to be honest with you, more so than a fine dice. I'm comfortable with that. I also threw in 4 cloves of garlic. Your mileage may vary. Some do less, some do more. Spices, salt, pepper, oregano, things of that nature. 1 cup of broth. It can be veggie stock. It can be chicken broth. It can be water, to be honest with you, if you absolutely need it. So I did that, got this bowl boiling and rolling a little bit. And then I added in my diced sweet potatoes. So this is 2 medium diced sweet potatoes. And really, you just want to give it a quick stir, get it covered up, and start to bring it to a medium boil, or a boil over medium heat. And that should take about 20 minutes to go from the point where you first put in your raw sweet potatoes to the point where they're kind of fork tender. So you're going to see me eventually, kind of pressing things against the side to see if they're tender enough for eating. So you can see that rolling boil starting to happen, and I'm starting to test it to see if they're tender. So they need a little bit more time, it looks like, from this. And this is such an easy meal. It's like, it took me, I think, 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes or so to go from chopping up everything and dumping this all basically in a pot and getting it together. So really straightforward meal, simple, hearty, pretty healthy. I'm going to work with our dietitian next time and see if I can get you all some actual like nutrition content instead of just telling you that it's healthy kind of vaguely. But it's a really light dish. There aren't a ton of calories in it. And there goes the kale. So just grab those, tear them up, toss them in there, press them down. And then at this point, I typically would only get that boil going again for like another 5 or 10 minutes again at the most, because I don't want it to fall apart too much. I want it to have some nice body to it. So that's what I'm doing right here. Toss them in there, move them around a little bit, and then I would cover it up and give it another, like I said, another 5 minutes or so. And then you're done, and you have this delicious soup. You can taste it and see how you feel about the combination of things. If you need additional spices or additional this or that. You can also, the other thing that I do sometimes is I'll take half of it, or half of the sweet potatoes even, and I'll blend up those, and then I'll add that back in so that it has some additional body. So it's like almost more of a half cream, like half kind of like a thinner cream, I guess I would say, like a sweet potato cream to it. So this is a really excellent soup. Like I said, I have a bowl with me right now that I will be eating. And yeah, much briefer than the previous videos, but I'm curious about any questions or any thoughts that you all have just on that soup. We'll take a little bite while we're waiting.
So I don't eat meat. Do you have a recommendation about what to put instead of sausage?
Sorry, I took a bite as soon as so I actually, I brought chickpeas with me, but I decided last moment not to throw in chickpeas. So I think chickpeas would be a great option. I think something like a black bean or a white bean, and just using that vegetable stock would be pretty great. Honestly, when I make chicken stock or I make bone broth or whatever on my own, I always roast those items, like the bones themselves, with vegetables. So, like a parsnip, a carrot, a potato, a garlic, an onion, something acidic, something savory. So you can do a veggie stock the exact same way, right? You can just roast only those vegetables, and then put them inside of your fresh water, and then boil them, and then kind of scoop them out that way. So you can still make a really hearty dish without including the sausage or the chicken broth. And you can also, of course, always just buy veggie stock from a store, including Market on the Green, which is downstairs.
I was thinking, I'm not a quinoa fan, but maybe you could throw something like that in, or barley even. I like barley. That would add some.
Yeah, I could see barley. That's a really good idea. It's a really good idea. I think soup is, there's so much space for creativity with soup. I think it's like soup, smoothies, and pizza are like those three things where you can kind of, create your own concoction, and it almost always will work out fine as long as you balance things out the right way. You don't want an all beet smoothie necessarily, but you can make a beet work inside of a smoothie, and you can make it work inside of a soup as well. There's so much space for creativity with soups, and there's plenty of time because it's cold and it's sitting indoors, right? So, any other thoughts or questions?
This doesn't have anything to do with winter growing, but at the end of the season last year, before it frosted and really got cold, I still had a lot of herbs in my garden. I thought, what the heck am I going to do with these? I hate for them to just die. So I bought a dehydrator, and I had parsley. I had a lot of cayenne peppers from my garden, oregano, sage, chives. I dried them. I picked everything that I could and dried them all. And I got so much. I put them in little jars and gave them to people for Christmas, and tons myself. And everybody really loved the idea of getting something that was homegrown and home dried from my yard.
Yeah, That's great.
That is awesome. Actually, we've done that before. We've given those as Christmas gifts in little jars. So it's a great gift.
Awesome.
It is.
Awesome. And I think, after the first year or so, once that oregano, once that thyme, once that mint gets established, you're literally having to give it away, right? So it's almost like it serves a number of purposes. That's pretty cool. I love it.
Sorry. I'm not a huge sage fan, but I grew 2 clumps last year because I read that if you have like a bonfire in your yard, the smell keeps the mosquitoes away.
Huh.
I didn't try it, but I have a big clump of sage, so I'll have to see if that works. Has anybody heard that it keeps mosquitoes away?
I'm not sure. I have a sage bundle at home for, like spiritual cleansing. I didn't mean to use quotes for that. Like I know it's an indigenous practice in a number of cultures in America. So I have a sage bundle for that. When I like move into a new place, sometimes I'll just do it just kind of as a ritual, but I mean, I'm not indigenous, so might be a bit of appropriation, but it is a use for sage. And if it's done respectfully, it could be a potential use, I guess.
My neighbor said that it will keep spirits away.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
She came in my house and she said, "Oh, it's an old house. Maybe somebody died here. Here, take some sage." And she like sprinkled it all around.
Absolutely. That's what I understand about it as well, like within like indigenous practices here. Yeah. It's so interesting.
For winter growing, we actually got a mushroom growing kit for Christmas. And I've like never really grown, I don't know if you guys can see it, never really grown mushrooms before, but it started out like that. And then we ended up getting them pretty decent size. And then I just cooked them in a pot with like onions and some red wine and stuff. I ate it in one sitting, of course, but it was really interesting to grow mushrooms.
Awesome. Will they come back again? Will there be a couple of like fruitings from the one kit?
The kit said that after you do your first harvest, you can re-soak the substrate that it came with, and then it might grow a second crop. But okay. I haven't done that yet.
Cool. That's really fun. There's so many, and that's another thing that has a million varieties. That as long as you're eating the safe varieties, it's pretty exciting to see the different ways that they taste. My friend Ben Cohen actually makes some sort of dish with mushrooms that ends up having such a rich taste that it's almost like a chocolate, and it's just like it blows me away every time I have it. Like I don't even understand what's happening or how it got there, but it just reminds me of just like this really rich chocolate. It's pretty fun. Any other thoughts or anything?
Do we have any idea when the next one of these is going to be?
Oh, we're going to aim for having it on the first Thursday of the month, I believe. Is that accurate?
I believe that it is. So it would be February 7th. Let me check.
I think it's
the 4th. Alina, do you know if that's the date we have? I'd have to look it up.
Okay. Well, yeah, it's on a Thursday. It's around this time, and it's either the first or the second Thursday of the month. But we'll make sure we get it to you.
Okay.
I'll make sure I send an invite out, ahead of time. Oh, her mic's not working. But I'll send you guys an invitation at least a couple days before.
Great.
But it'll be around that time.
Great. So I'm hoping that we can all participate in the virtual seed swap in some way. That information will be forthcoming or will be coming soon. I guess I would say about how we can actually participate. I think I would love if you all could come to the next session with kind of a plan that you've thought through or you've sketched out. Maybe you do the graphing, maybe you look at the charts, or maybe you just think about what you want to grow and why you want to grow it. But I would love to be able to just talk about that a bit more for the upcoming year. We'll do some seed timing. What time does this need to grow on the ground if you want to grow it from seed versus when do you want to buy a plant versus what do you want to start indoors? So just all those pieces. And I'm hoping to potentially, I think we may be able to have a guest that can help us work through some of those things a bit more than I can, or I guess they're better at it so that they don't ramble and go off the tracks the way that I do sometimes. So we'll have that. And the last thing that I wanted to talk about for next session is what should we make? Are there any ideas in mind for what I should make a video on? I know I'll still have sweet potatoes. I know I still have potatoes at home. I know I have garlic and another large winter squash that's holding on. So I'm thinking about, let's just try to keep it seasonal as much as we can, despite knowing that, I don't have necessarily a ton of stuff left for the growing season. Just like, what are the other seasonal things that you all have in mind for a February?
I have stuff that's not winter seasonal, but that I grew and froze. So, but I don't know that.
I think that counts as well. I had a deep freezer full of tomatoes for 1 year, and that was, the only way that I could manage to eat tomatoes during the winter.
The next session, by the way, is February 11th at 11:30.
I have a related, I guess, question. Do you have any idea about when the Toledo seed swap usually occurs?
It's normally in February. Okay.
Yep. Okay.
So I'll keep my eyes peeled, and I can send something along. Although Nicole, you may actually already know. I'm not sure. We'll find out and we'll get it to you for sure. And just think a little bit about what sorts of items you all are interested in. I want to, create something that's interactive. I know we still aren't able to meet in person, but I still want to try to create some interactivity with this, so we can have some conversations and we can kind of, uplift your voices if you're interested in seeing a particular thing. So keep that in mind. And of course, as always, this is my contact information. That's my office number. That's my email. And the top link, Ebeid RSVP, will take you to a registration form. So whenever we have activities, which of course is rare nowadays, we have just a sign up form where you can request space or you can do whatever else that's needed. You can RSVP and you can get a reminder. So all you need is your first name and the best way to contact you, and then the different opportunities. We also always have a collection of other things that are just consistently ongoing. So we have art classes with NAMI. We have the garden and plate cooking class. I guess you all can tell that this is an old form at this point, but we also have like pretty deep partnerships with a couple of small business development and entrepreneurship organizations. So we could connect you with them. We could connect you with an STNA program. We could connect you with volunteer opportunities and things of that nature. So it's a pretty straightforward form. The other thing is, this is a room request form. So once things open back up at the Ebeid Center and we have space available for the community to rent, whether you're a nonprofit, whether you're a community group, whether you're, whatever, you can put in a request for space and give it a topic area and a date and time that you have in mind, and we'll get it set up for you. It's a free thing that we offer at the Ebeid Center. You can see there's a kitchen behind us. We have 2 modular classrooms. We have an STNA classroom. We have a small computer lab with 3 computers with free printing. So we just have a lot of things that are available here, and I always want to make sure that once things are back to normal, whatever that looks like, or back to being able to gather, maybe not back to normal, right? I want it to be a space that's accessible to everyone. So that's something to keep in mind. And the last thing is, our Financial Opportunity Center has continued to operate, although they are all working from home at this point. So if you're interested in, getting your budget on track, if you're interested in paying off some debt, if you're interested in, starting a bank account that will match up to $300, so you get a $600 payout. If you're interested in a savings circle, whatever those things are, send an email to foc@promedica.org and they can get you set up. So That's the only other thing. That's the end of my spiel, I guess I'll say. And that is it. Are there any other questions or any other?
Just thank you very much, Malcolm. Always a pleasure. You always
Yes.
have information.
This
Great.
was excellent. The only one thing I wanted to ask is, can you email us those documents, Nicole or I, those documents, so we can pass them along?
Yep.
Okay. So everybody on the call will get an email then, and it'll have all those documents that he shared.
Great. Yep.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you guys for being here today. This was excellent.
All right.
Love it.
Yeah.
Bye.
Nice to see you all, and I'll see you later. I'll see you soon.
All right.
All right. Have a good day.
Malcolm.
All right. You
Thanks.
too. Bye.
Bye, Mom. Bye-bye.